Hi, welcome to Coding Bootcamp's YouTube channel. Subscribe now and join our live stream session later. See you.
Hey guys, welcome to codingbootcamps.com. This is intermediate JavaScript and jQuery with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Ghargi. I am a senior mean stack developer. I have over 5 years of experience with web development and cloud technologies. I have a master's degree from Illinois Institute of Technology, and I am also a co-founder of Indicate Digital, which is a startup based in Chicago, which I founded with my colleague from IntelliFlow, from IIT. I also founded IntelliFlow Systems, which is a Pune-based startup where we focus more on the Azure technologies. I also worked as a full stack developer at 1871, which is a startup incubator in Chicago, for over 2 years. And I have been teaching with High School Technology Services um, since 2016, and I have been focused more on the web development as well as cross-platform mobile development and Linux development courses for students from US and Canada. My current focus right now is just the web application development courses and not the cross-platform mobile application. You can check out my page on codingbootcamps.com where I have different courses that I take, and you can also follow codingbootcamps.com to on social media to get more updates on my courses. So in this course, before we begin this course, you need to have a basic knowledge of HTML and CSS, as well as knowledge of JavaScript. So I recommend you take my previous course, which was an introduction to JavaScript, where I cover the fundamentals of JavaScript programming, as well as how to use JavaScript to manipulate the front end of your web page, so you can add more uh, custom features such as button click events and the interactivity that usually requires for the web applications. In this project, or sorry, in this course, what we are going to do is we are going to do a quick refresher of JavaScript programming. So this will be the fundamental concepts of JavaScript, which include the lexical structure of the language, expressions, types, variables, functions, arrays, and loops. After that, we'll be covering the more important aspect of JavaScript that we will be using. So we will dive deeper into the functions that we have covered in the earlier JavaScript course, but we will actually expand on it more. So we will understand the different types of functions, the parameters, and the returns that the functions require, as well as we will learn about manipulating the arrays. Okay, and how there are pre-built functions in JavaScript to manipulate the arrays. In the next section, we are going to be covering the um, manipulating the user information. So in that case, we'll be understanding the Navigator window screen objects that are provided within the web browser, and we'll understand how we can get more information about the user's web browser, and depending on that, we can customize the user experience. In the next session, we are going to be covering JavaScript and jQuery on a much more advanced level. We will understand how to use jQuery and how to add it to the web page, as well as understanding the document object model that the HTML has, and also how to manipulate that document object model using jQuery. So that means by selecting various elements on the page, we can add more content, remove content, and we can make it much more interactive than we could with the simple JavaScript. Okay, the next thing we're going to be understanding is how to access these elements using jQuery and how to add events on top of it. So events is a much more interesting concept that we'll be covering. And if you want to cover web application development using any of the frameworks like Angular or React or any one of them, events is a key concept that you have to understand, and we will cover that in jQuery. After that, we'll cover the animation and the effects. So jQuery has pretty good animation library that is in it, and they have some very well-defined functions which we will use to add to the web page, as well as we'll create some swapping images like slideshows on the web page, as well as we'll understand how to implement navigation much better way in a much better way than simple JavaScript using jQuery. And after that, we can expand more on the interface with jQuery, where we will see how we can organize the content in tabs and panels, and add sliders to your website, as well as determining the size and position of the page elements, adding tooltips, and then providing the best user experience that we can. In the last section, what we will do is we will cover JSON and Ajax client-side applications. So we will actually fetch the data from a third-party service where we want to display that data onto our web page. So that is the most important aspect of using jQuery, and especially Ajax client of jQuery, and working with JSON data. All right. So the projects that we are going to be building on after we have completed all of this will be, the first one will be the image swap gallery. Like I mentioned, we will be creating a slideshow of images. The next is we're going to be creating a login page. So a login page is a pretty common web application implementation that you see on any of the websites that you use, like for example Amazon. All of them have a login page, so we'll be building a login page. In the last project, we'll be using the third-party API for COVID tracker. So as you know, the 2020 is a year that will be marked in our history books as the COVID-19 year, and it actually upended everything. So we'll be building some useful tools to track this disease, and we'll be implementing our skills to build this tool. Okay. So what do you learn by finishing this course? Okay, so you have the basic understanding of JavaScript. Now you have much more advanced understanding of JavaScript. Now you really understand how to use the advanced level JavaScript and jQuery to improve upon the user experience, and how to get and fetch more data from the backend systems, how to organize the data, how to transform the data, and make it presentable to your end user. And after that, you can actually work on taking much more advanced courses such as frameworks. Okay, so jQuery is just a library that is built on top of JavaScript. But if you want much more capability, if you're going to be building a web application that caters to thousands of different people, then a framework will be much more helpful. And you can explore on different frameworks, the front end as well as the back end frameworks, in all of our classes so mentioned over here. So I personally teach Node.js, Express.js, and MongoDB. I strongly encourage you to take Node.js since that's the backend implementation of JavaScript. You will understand how to build backend, as well as then later on you can take AngularJS frameworks, as well as React. All right, so that is it. I hope you take this course, and I will see you in the next session. Take care. Hey guys, welcome to Advanced JavaScript. In this course, we are going to be covering jQuery with JSON and Ajax. Before we begin, let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Kaustubh Gharge. I am a senior instructor at coding bootcamps. I know my name is hard to pronounce, so you can call me KG. I'm a senior instructor at coding bootcamps. I've been teaching coding since 2017 at High School Technology Services as well as coding bootcamps. I work as a full stack web developer at my firm in Chicago since 2018, and I have a master's degree in computer science from Illinois Institute of Technology. So that's me. Let's now quickly look at the session outline. So in this session, we are just going to be covering the basic fundamentals of JavaScript that we learned in the previous course. We're going to keep this session short and quick because we need to just refresh our knowledge of the basic JavaScript concepts so that we can be confident enough to dive into the much more advanced concepts. Okay, so we are going to be covering the strings, literals, arrays, and functions that we learned in the previous course. We're just going to be quickly going over them and make sure we have our foundation set and we can move on and dive straight into the advanced concepts. So again, as a prerequisite, I remind everybody you have to be able to write some sort of HTML and JavaScript to take on the advanced JavaScript course. So make sure you check out these courses before you take this course. So let's start with a quick refresher. We will dive into each one of them one at a time. So scope, right? So I'm definitely sure that you understand the concept of scope. It's very simple. So for example, let's consider you declare a variable on top of the JavaScript file that you're writing, and you can use this variable anywhere, right? That means it has a global scope. But what if you declare a variable inside a function? Now you can use that variable inside that function and that function only. That means that variable has a local scope. That's the differentiating factor between the local as well as the global scope. Loops. Loops are a block of code that can be executed a number of times. So we have three types of loops. We have for loop, we have while loop, and we have do while loop. In terms of for loop, we run the block of code n number of times. The n, that is the times that the code has to be repeated, is provided by the developer. And in case of while loop, we run the loop unless and until the condition is satisfied. Okay, so if the condition holds true, that means the while loop keeps on running. It breaks as soon as the condition is set to false. Same in the case with do while, but with do while, we run the loop at least once, or we run that block of code at least once, even if the condition is false. Okay. So semicolons are like the simplest way of understanding semicolons is the English language. So we use a full stop to complete a sentence in English language. In programming world, we use semicolon to denote the end of expression. These aren't mandatory in JavaScript, but it's always a good practice to end your expressions with semicolons. Comments, we have two ways we can write comments: multi-line comments and single-line comments. Multi-line line comments are the / and the asterisk, right? So we use usually multi-line comments to explain what a function or what the block of code is doing. Usually, at least I like to write it before I write the function to explain the functionality of that specific function. And single-line comments are usually to make sure that the reader understands my reasoning behind naming of the variables and what value that variable will hold. Literal. Literal is any value that is written in source code. So for example, a number, boolean, or a string. Expressions. So an expression is a valid unit of code that resolves to a value. So in this example, we have 300 greater than 19. This resolves to the value of true. Expressions can be further categorized as arithmetic, logical, string, and so on. The example that we are seeing here is of category logical. Now, a task for you is to come up with an arithmetic expression of your own. I'll give an example. 3 plus 7 equals 10. Okay. So types. Now, type is very important when we declare a variable. That means we know what specific data type the variable will hold. So in this case, we have variable length equals 10. That means the variable length is of type number. If you were to store a string, this will be of type string. So if the 10 were in double quotes, that means we were holding the data type of string in variable length. Variables are nothing but containers to storing the data value. So if you go back to your calculus where you used to have x's and y's, that's the same concept applied here. It's just a storage for holding a data value. Functions. So functions are a block of code designed to perform a particular task. So in this case, as you can see, this function is a multiplication function. It takes in two parameters, p1 and p2, that is, let's say, number 1 and number 2. Or in this case, it is returning the multiplication of, it's running the multiplication of p1 and p2. Let's consider those are two numbers. Let's say it's 5 and 6, it should return 30 in this case. So the function is
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
written to design a particular task, right? So in this case, it is multiplication. You can create function for all kinds of arithmetic operation you can think of, but even in some cases, like for example, if you want to validate a login information, we can create a function for that specific task. Arrays is a special variable which can hold more than one value at a time. So it can hold different values, it can hold strings, it can hold numbers. And array is an object in JavaScript. Okay. Let us dive a bit deeper into functions because we'll be using functions quite often in this course. So the way you define function is you start with the function keyword and the name of your function followed by parentheses and opening and closing braces, and inside it you write your code that you want to execute. Function also takes in some parameters and returns some values. So usually the parameters you see are passed in when you call on the function. So in case of the previous multiplication you saw, the multiplication function you saw, in that it took in two parameters that had two numbers and it returned a value. So it just returned the product of those two numbers. And inside the function, the parameters behave as local variables. Okay, now the interesting use case of function is on certain events. So for example, let's say if you were to submit a contact form on a web page, in that case, when the user clicks on the submit button on that specific event, you would run a function to submit the form data to your database, right? So you have to attach a event handler to your submit button, and on the event you run a function that specifically takes all that contact information that the user has submitted and passes it on to the database. So arrow functions are nothing but normal functions, but they allow us to write in a much shorter format, and they were introduced in ECMAScript 6. So this is a key differentiating factor between a regular function as well as arrow function. The arrow function is also called fat arrow because of this specific literal right here. They allow us to write clear and concise code. Declaring arrays. So you already know how to declare an array. In this case, we have an array of fruits, and array again is an object in the JavaScript, and like any object, you have some methods on it. So in this case, when you see console.log and we pass in the array.length, that means it will return the length of 2 because we have 2 items in there. So manipulating arrays. So here are a few examples on how you can manipulate array. So one of the ways is you can use the methods on the array object. So you have for each method in which you try to traverse the array and print out every one of the item in the array. Then if you want to add to it, you can use array.push method. If you want to remove from it from a certain index point, you can use array.splice method. And there are a few methods that you can work on it. We are not going to be covering those in detail. This is just a quick refresher, but I do recommend you checking out the resources on Mozilla Developer Network to understand the other methods and other ways you can manipulate the array. All right, so this was just a quick refresher. I just wanted everybody to get on the same page, and in the next session we are going to be covering the jQuery as well as understand how we can use jQuery to manipulate the DOM, that is a document object model. And I'll see you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey guys, welcome back to Advanced JavaScript course. with jQuery, JSON, and Ajax. Who am I? My name is Kaustubh Kharge, but you can call me KG. I will be covering session 2 of Advanced JavaScript today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. In this session, we are going to be covering window, navigator, as well as screen object. Now, you have to make sure that you understand is that these objects are not JavaScript objects. These are the objects that are provided by the browser that the user is using. So let's begin. Again, if you have not covered HTML and CSS as well as the basics of JavaScript programming, I'm going to strongly recommend you to check these courses. Let's look at the window object. So window object represents a window in a browser. So imagine if you open up a new tab in Google Chrome that will have its own window object, and each of these window objects will have properties and functions. So let us go into Google Chrome. I'm going to select the inspect element by right clicking on anywhere on the screen, and I'm going to open up the developer tools and go to the console. In here I'm going to type in window and I'm going to press enter. So you can see the properties of the window objects and the functions that we can use. So one of the reasons for using window object is to figure out the responsiveness, figure out the size of the window to handle the responsiveness of the CSS. That's one of the ways. Other ways is you can figure out what browser that the user is using. So if you want to use the experimental features that you want to use in the HTML or JavaScript, you can use them based on the browser that the user is using. You also get to know what kind of operating system the user is using. So if you scroll up and if I expand this, I get all of the information right here with the client information and the app version. So I'm using a Mac OS X and I'm using a Google Chrome browser. So if you scroll down, it is going to show the vendor as Google Inc. Okay. Now the methods or the functions that you get here are denoted as F over here. And let me quickly show you one of the functions. So let me clear this out. So let's say if I wanted to print out this page, I'm going to say window.print, and it opens up a print tab, and it is asking me to print out this page. Now obviously I'm not going to print it out, I don't have a printer connected, but this is the way you can use the methods on the window object. Let's go back to the slides. So Navigator object is within the window object itself. Navigator object contains information about the browser. It has the state and identity of the user agent that we just saw. It is just a read-only. It can be only used as a read-only, but we get very valuable information from the Navigator object that we can use to further provide a much better and rich user experience to the user. So let us go back and see what we have under the Navigator object. So I'll say window.navigator, and I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to expand. So I have all this information. So I have the app name, the app version. I even have the web Bluetooth. This is supported, I think, only in Google Chrome right now. It's not supported in a lot of different other browsers, but it's supported in the Chromium project. You can see the geolocation. You can see the credentials. If you're using obviously the credentials API that the Google Chrome provides you. You can also check the storage. You can check the service worker. So this is a pretty useful tool that we use to figure out what kind of browser and what kind of settings are there on the browser to provide a much more better user experience on the front end. Let's move ahead. So screen object is usually used to calculate the height and width of the screen. So screen object is it holds the information about the browser screen. So let us go back and see what we have under the screen object. So we'll say window dot screen, and I'm going to press enter. And if I expand this, I get the available height, the available left, the available top, available width, and color depth, height, orientation. So you also get the screen orientation. That's pretty amazing. We can make sure that our design is responsive uh, in any kind of device orientation, either it's landscape or portrait. So let's quickly test this out. So let's say if the device is iPad right here, and I currently have this in the landscape mode. If I change this to portrait mode, let's run this again. Let me expand this. So I get a portrait primary, right? So that's pretty cool. Now if I change this to, let's say, a phone, and I run this, the dimensions will obviously change. So you can see, you can notice here the available width and the available height has obviously changed, and the screen orientation again is portrait. But if I were to check out with the Navigator, let's see what information we get on the Navigator. I don't think we'll this is just a simulation that we are running right here. It's not the actual device. So let us see Navigator, and I expand this. Oh, I get a vendor information too, so that's pretty cool. I get here the Google INC, and I get the platform, I get the vendor. Let me check if this is say it's a Motorola. Check this out. Yeah, so this works pretty well. I strongly recommend you check out these different properties and the functions that are provided with these objects. We'll be using few of them in the next sessions, especially in the project. But let's go back to the slides now. So this concludes this session. Let's do a quick recap. So we covered the window object, the screen object, as well as the navigator object. The reason we have all these objects, or the reason they're important, is because we can figure out what kind of browser the user is using, and based on that we can make changes that will enrich the user experience. So in the next session we're going to be talking about JavaScript libraries, adding jQuery, and we're going to be talking about manipulating the HTML using jQuery. So I will see you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript, jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. I'll be covering session 3 of this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be discussing what JavaScript libraries are and how you can use them, understand what jQuery is, how do we add jQuery to our HTML page, how do we modify our existing HTML page. But before we do that, we'll also get a quick refresher about DOM, that is the document object model. We already covered this in the Introduction to JavaScript course, but a quick refresher will definitely be helpful, after which we'll cover on how we can manipulate the DOM using jQuery. If you do not have fundamentals of JavaScript programming clear, then you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course as well as HTML to understand the document object model. So let's understand what JavaScript libraries are. JavaScript libraries are a collection of functions which have been written by other people that we can use in our code. These functions provide us with certain functionalities, which can save our time, as we don't have to rewrite the code from scratch to implement certain functionalities. Consider a slideshow, for example. You want to show the user a slideshow of photographs. Now, this functionality has been used for many years on the web. Few smart developers have already written functions to showcase this functionality. What if they provided us with this code? They do, in fact. This is provided to us by a library which has all of these pre-written functions. And jQuery is one of such libraries, which makes our lives easier by providing us predefined functions which handle certain functionalities. So before we dive into getting jQuery, let's understand what jQuery is. jQuery is a JavaScript library designed to simplify
If you have enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
HTML DOM manipulation, event handling, CSS animation, and Ajax. It is free and open source under MIT license. So now how do we get jQuery? We get it from jQuery.com. We can either download the file or get it through CDN, which stands for Content Delivery Network. So let's quickly go to jQuery.com to review our options. So as you can see, there's a big button here that says download jQuery. If you select it, you get all of the options to get the jQuery. So one of the options is to download the files and save it with HTML. We also have options to use tools such as npm and yarn, which we won't be using for this session. And we have something called CDN, which I personally like to use. CDN is called Content Delivery Network, so we get the jQuery from one of these CDNs. So let me look at Google CDN real quick. So as you can see, you get a script tag with a source for Google servers where the jQuery file is located. All we have to do is include the script tag in our header or the head tag in the HTML. That's it. That's the easiest way we can add jQuery to our HTML page. All right. So adding jQuery to the HTML page, we already looked at. Either you can download the jQuery file to your local system and add it to the HTML page by using the script tag with the URL on where it is stored, or you can add it using the CDN like we just saw in case of Google. Okay, moving on. So modifying web pages. The most common use of jQuery is to use it to modify a web page, and that is true for most of the extensions which are libraries that provide extended functionality over JavaScript. So for example, if you want to change the color of an element on an event or show an element on an event, for example, let's consider you want to display an error message pop-up box to the user when they enter wrong credit card details. Such functionalities can be handled by jQuery. However, before we jump in these use cases, we must refresh our memory about DOM, that is the document object model. So DOM provides a object representation of HTML page, which means all of the elements or events, etc., can be represented as objects, which can be accessed using JavaScript, or in our case, it will be jQuery. So selecting the page elements using the jQuery. So do you remember how we selected DOM elements using the good old JavaScript? We use something called document.getElementById or getElement by class name. jQuery provides a much more easier way to access the elements and attach event handlers to them. So let's quickly go to JSFiddle right here. Let me close this. Let me clear this out. And in here, let me add jQuery. I'll add the latest version. Let me add a boilerplate code. All right, excellent. So now let's create an element here with some ID. So I'll create a div with an ID of, let's say, my div. And if I were to access this in my log, the console.log, what I will do is I will say console.log. Let me add some space. I'll make sure I remove the space later on. I'll start with the dollar symbol. This is a global jQuery function. What this means is we initiated the jQuery, and inside this we will add a pound symbol and say my div. So the pound symbol allows us to access the ID attribute of any given element. So in this case, we're accessing my div, right? So I'll just say this, and I will add a square bracket with 0 because I want to access the first thing that that is provided to me in the log. So I'll just save this, and if you can see, I can access the element right here. Okay, so this is equivalent to the expression we had in JavaScript called document.getElementById. Okay, so moving on. Oh, my mistake. So we can add content to the page in real time. For that, we use the append function on the element which we have to access. So let's edit our existing code to see how this works. Let me go back. So let me attach a new element to this existing div. So what I'll do is I will quickly comment this out and append a, let's say, header tag element to this div. So I will first access the div using my div. I'll use the append function, and inside of here I will say h1. I'll say hi there, and I'll close the h1 tag. Okay, now if I save this, you can see the h1 tag added inside my div. Perfect. Moving on to the next slide. We can set attributes of tags which we have selected by using the attribute function. So let's look at the attributes of tags which we have already in our code. So let's add an attribute in our HTML file for our div, my div, and for that we'll say name. Let's say let's say content div, main content div. Okay, now let's see if we can get this attribute by using the attribute function. Okay, so what I will do is I will just say I'll just reuse this console.log, and instead of the 0 I will just add I will just add the attribute function. Alright, save this. Alright, I get a script error. I don't know why I get the script error. Let me see. Oh, I have to pass in the name. I'm sorry. So we have to pass in the name and save it. And we get this attribute right here. Alright, excellent. However, one thing to keep in mind, the attribute method gets the attribute value for the first element. So this is the first element in the math set. To get the value of each element individually, we'll have to use looping methods such as each or map, which we'll cover in the future sessions of this course. Now for setting the attributes, we can use the same attribute function with name and value passed in as parameters to this. So in this case, let's say if I want to add an attribute of class. So how would we do that? So I would say $, get the element first, my div attribute, and I will add the class and the value for it. So I'll say my class. Save this. Alright, so it's saved, but we didn't see anything, so let's just quickly see if it was applied. And inside of here, I'll say class. Save this, and I get the value of the class attribute that we have set for this particular div. Perfect. Now, if you want to add more than one attribute at any given time, then we have to group them together in an object, right? So for example, let's quickly see how this will look. Let me make some space here. All right. So what I'll do is I'll just convert this into an object. So we'll have to use a key value pair. So remove these double quotes from the key. And let me add another attribute. I'll say title. I'll add my title as the value. Remove this extra space. Save this. and see if this worked or not. So let me just log the title attribute. Save this. Yes, I get the my title right here, and of course the class as well. So perfect. So this was applied. Perfect. So moving on to the next slide. So we already covered the attribute method. Moving on to reading setting and removing the HTML attributes. Uh, yeah. So let's look at some other ways we can find attributes, values for elements, and also how to remove any of these. So let's look at getting the content first. So we use the text, HTML, and value methods. Let's look at the HTML method first. What this does is to get the HTML contents of the first element in the set of matched elements, or even to set HTML contents for every matched element. Right. So let's log the contents out for our div. So do you know what the contents are for our div? You can see it here. There's nothing in here, but remember we added a h1 tag right here. So if we, let me just quickly comment this out and make some space and quickly log out that. I'll just reuse this code, and instead of attribute we just need the HTML and remove the value that has been passed in. So it should log in the h1 tag that we have been setting it in here. So if I save this, there we go. So we get the h1 element that has been present inside the div. So this is the raw HTML, right? So we have the opening and closing braces as well. Perfect. Now let's look at the text. It allows us to get or set the combined text contents for each element in the set of matched elements. So let's look at an example. Let me create a paragraph tag inside here real quick. So I will add a paragraph tag, and we'll give it an ID of my paragraph, and inside let's say something like hello world. All right, perfect. Now if I were to see the text content inside this paragraph element, all I would do is, let me just quickly reuse this, same one time, and in here I will just call in the ID of my paragraph. So it's paragraph, and I will call in the text method to get the text inside of the text content inside of it. So let me save this, and I get hello world. So perfect. Now let's look at the value method. So the value method is primarily used to get values from form elements such as input, select, or text area. So let's quickly create a input element in here of type button. Let's say type button. I'll give it a value of say click me, and I'll give it an ID of my button. All right, perfect. Now let's see if we can get a value of this. We already have a value set here for click me. I'll just reuse this again. Oops. And instead of my paragraph, I'll say my button, and I'll get a value of this button. So I'll say val. If I save this, I get click me, right? So perfect. So this is particularly important during the form submission. So like for example, if the user has entered email and password, and if you want to get the value that has been entered into the form, and you can just get these values and then you can process it. Okay, so moving on. So the element selector can also be used to select multiple elements. Let's select paragraph and h1 elements that we already have in our code and change the background color to see how this works actually. So let me go back and let me actually remove some of these. It's taking too much space. Oops, my mistake. All right, so let me access the H1 as well as the paragraph.
Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.
So I'll say H1 and now I have to change the background for H1 and the paragraph. So I'll use something called a CSS method, which will allow me to change the properties of the CSS for these particular elements. So I want to change the background color, and I want to change it to let's say blue. Okay, let me save this, and as you can see, it changed the background color to blue for the header as well as the paragraph. Perfect. Great. So now before we end this session, let's quickly recap what we learned today. So in this session, we covered what JavaScript libraries are and how you can use them. We understood what jQuery is and how we can add jQuery to our HTML page. But most importantly, how we can manipulate the DOM using jQuery. We're just getting started, and we'll cover jQuery in quite some detail from next session onwards. So I'll see you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. I'll be covering session 4 of this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be discussing using jQuery selectors. We already covered some of them in previous session. However, we'll dive a bit deeper into them. We'll also cover wildcards. We'll also be selecting by tag ID, class, attribute, and position. Again, we already covered one of these in the previous session. However, we'll look at the other ways we can select the elements on the page. Again, as a reminder, if you do not have fundamentals of JavaScript programming clear, you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course as well as HTML to understand the document object model. It's very important. All right, using jQuery selectors. So jQuery selectors are used to find or select HTML elements based on the name, ID, classes, types, attributes, even values of attributes, and much more. It's based on the existing CSS selectors. Okay, we already covered a few of them in the last session. For example, we covered ID as well as attribute. However, as we proceed along the course, we will use many of these selectors quite extensively. So, moving on to the next slide. Wildcards. So wildcard is a kind of selector which is used to get all the elements in the HTML. So let's go back to the code that I have right here, and let's say if I wanted to get all of the elements in this HTML document, what I would do is I would say console.log and initiate the jQuery and use this wildcard. So wildcard here in case is an asterisk to get all of them. Okay, and I will just save this. So I get all of the elements that are present in this document. The list is long, so you won't be diving deep into it, but you can take some time and make sure you go through all of them. Moving on. However, let's consider a use case where we have 3 input fields. Okay, so let me quickly add 3 input fields with IDs. So I'll say input of type text, and I'll give it an ID of, let's say, field. We have to create 3, right? So I'll just add 1 right here, close this, and create 2 more. All right, great. And in here, I'm gonna give it a different name, a different ID, because it has to be unique. Now, in here, if I wanted to get all of these, if I wanted to select all of them based on their ID, we know the naming convention, right? So we know the naming convention of the ID. So we can use a wildcard selector to select these elements. So what I will do here is I'll remove this, and I'll put a square bracket, I'll say ID, and give me all of the IDs with field name let's start with field and an underscore. Okay, and I will get a value of test. So all of them. So let's say I want to assign them some value. So I'll just assign them a value. So I want to assign all of them a value of, let's say, test. All right, great. So let me save this. So as you can see, I get 3 elements with an assigned value of test. All right, moving on to the next slide. So let's look at selecting by tag ID, class, attribute, and position. For ID, we already covered selecting elements by ID in the previous session. Do you remember? The way we do this is by using the pound symbol followed by the ID selector. Like, let's say, in this case, let's say you want to log this out. So what I would do is I'll say console.log, put in a $sign, and I'll say pound, and let's see, I want to log out the field 1. All right, save this. Oops, let me clear this out. Let me save this again. All right, so this is the value I get for the field 1. So I've selected this ID. All right, excellent. So now let's say if you were to find the elements using a specific class. Okay, so to find elements using specific class, we write by using period character followed by the name of the class. So let's say if we were to give this a class of, let's say, my div class, the way I would access this element is by using, let me comment this out, and let me make some space here so that it's clear. So we log this out by using the class selector. So I will say $, and I will log in, say it is followed by the period. Okay, so you type in the period and you type in the div class. All right, excellent. Now if I save this, it will log it out, right? So it logged out the div element. Perfect. Now the same way we can use to find the element by using the tag name. So we have to use a valid tag name. I think we already done this in the previous session, but let's quickly look at how we can access the div, right? So instead of the class name, we will just say div. This will select all the divs that exist on the HTML page. Right now we only have one div. So if I save this, it gives me the existing div. So let me clear this out so you can see how this loads. So it gave me the existing div. All right, perfect. Moving on. Now attribute. So we use this to select all elements with certain attributes that contain some value that we are looking for. So for example, let's say if I wanted to get the get the element with the attribute of name and content div. So what I would do is I would log this out. So instead of here, let me remove this and let me say name equals it's content div. Right, so perfect. Let me save this. Let me save this. Oops. So I get the element that has the name attribute of content div. Perfect. Oops. Oh, we missed position. So we use this to find the position for a particular element. So let's say if you wanted to find the position of, let's say, this paragraph, what we would do is we would select it by the name. So we'll select it by the ID. So I'll say my paragraph, and I will use the position function. So it'll give me the position of where it's located. So if I save this, it gives me the position. It says it's, from left it's like 8 pixels and from top it's like 0 pixels. So perfect. Great. Now, before we end this session, let's quickly recap of what we learned today. To recap, we quickly looked at a few more jQuery selectors in this session. We also learned wildcard selectors, along with class, attribute, tag, and position selectors. We'll dive much more deeper into these once we start working on our projects. Okay, so in the next session, we'll be looking at events and how we can use jQuery to handle events. So I'll see you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Garge, but you can call me KG. I will be covering session 5 of Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be covering what events are and how they can be used in the jQuery. We'll also learn how to manage events. If you do not have fundamentals of JavaScript programming clear, then you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course as well as HTML course to understand the document object model. So what are events? Events are actions or occurrences that happen in the system when you're programming and the system tells you about it. So for example, let's consider you're checking out on Amazon and you have filled in your card details, and when you check out and when you select pay now, what happens within the system is an event is raised. That means the form has been submitted by the user, and based on that event, the system has to do or has to perform a certain number of steps. Okay, so this is how events are used. So using the events in a jQuery way, in the jQuery, it's somewhat similar to what we have been doing in JavaScript. So consider this example for a while. So we have a paragraph tag that has been selected, and we have attached a click event to all the paragraphs on the page. So that means whenever user clicks on any of the paragraphs that are on the page, a click event will be raised. Okay, so we already understand what an event is, but we have to understand how one event is fired. So whenever something interesting occurs on the page, an event is fired, meaning that the browser basically announces that something has happened. So in this announcement, we as developers have to listen to certain events and react to them appropriately. So remember when I gave an example of checkout form on Amazon? So that's not just one of the events. I mean, that's not the only event, but we can have more events. So like, for example, when the user uses their mouse cursor to hover over some element, or they use their keyboard to enter in the keystrokes, those events are captured as well. We can also define our custom elements in jQuery. So let's dive a bit deeper into the jQuery event concepts. So the document.ready allows us to execute a function when the method is fully loaded. So let's go back to the code and let's assume for a moment that, oops, my mistake. Let me save this. All right, let me clear this out. Okay, so let's assume that we have this HTML page as well as JavaScript, but let's assume that this page load takes time. Okay, it's a big file and the loading takes time, or we have some network issues. What would happen if we would have to access this paragraph element? What would happen in this case if the HTML page itself is not loaded and the jQuery fires the function where it tries to select the element with an ID of my paragraph? Since the HTML page hasn't been loaded, we actually will face a problem where it says that I couldn't find, the jQuery will say that I couldn't find the ID of my paragraph, right? So to avoid that, we use document.ready function, and we look for the event that the document has been loaded. So once the document has been loaded, we can perform the rest of the operations. Okay, so it's just a fail-safe mechanism to make sure that the HTML page is fully loaded before we start operating on it. So one of the most common is the click event handler, right? Click event method. in which when the user clicks on a particular HTML element, a function or a event handler is raised. So if we look at in here, and if I uncomment this.
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
Oops. All right, so let me move this right inside here. And let me comment these out. These we will cover these in the next slide. So in here, let's say if the paragraph is clicked and we have to log in that event. So let's click on this. Okay, there's some mistake here. Let me quickly check this. So I think it was a problem with my JS fiddle. So let me quickly uncomment this. All right, and let me comment this out. And let me save this. And let me click on the paragraph and see if the event is logged. Okay, so the event is logged in here perfectly. Okay, so what is happening is I've selected the element with an ID of my paragraph and attached a click event, and attached the event handler for it. And once it clicks, it logs the event. So double click acts in a similar way, but instead of just single clicking, we capture the event when the user double clicks on the HTML element, and we perform certain tasks on it. We'll dive a bit deeper into the advanced event management. So one of the ways is to figure out if the user's cursor is moving along, right? Or if they have entered a keystroke on their keyboard. So let's look at the mouse over event. So let me uncomment this. So mouse over event is like if let me comment this out. We'll discuss that later. Okay. Make some space here. Okay. So the mouse over event is once the cursor is moved over an element. So in this case, the element is my paragraph. So we already have a hello world paragraph right here. And if I move the mouse over, oops. Okay, let me run this again. All right. So if I move the mouse over, it logs. Okay. The same way, if I move it away, if I were to move it away, I would have to use the mouse leave function or the mouse leave event. You have to listen for the mouse leave event. And we have mouse over. Release it. I have to save it every time by mistake. I'm sorry. All right. Let me clear this. All right. So we have mouse over and we have mouse leave. Okay. So we are listening to these advanced events, and we can also have certain custom events that we can use. So let's dive a bit deeper into the on method. So on method is where we can listen to multiple different events. So in this case, we are listening to we are selecting all of the paragraph elements, and whenever we listen to the click event on these paragraph, we perform certain tasks. We can attach multiple event listeners onto this on method. All right, so before we jump into recap, let me quickly talk about custom events. So custom events offer a new way of thinking, okay? They put emphasis on the target of the behavior, which means, like, let's say if the certain things happen, let's say a class is applied to a text in a paragraph, then we can treat it as a custom event. So like, for example, another example would be, let's say if the user is shown a pop-up, and we can define that as a separate event in itself, and based on that and what the user interacts or how the user interacts on that pop-up, we can perform certain different tasks. Okay, so this is how we can define custom events. We'll actually cover this in detail when we start working on our projects. Okay, so before we end this session, let's quickly look at what we have learned so far. We learned what events are and how jQuery handles them. We also learned about how event management is used in jQuery. From next session onwards, we'll be going a bit advanced and applying whatever we have learned thus far. So I will see you in the next session. Take care. Bye. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Ghadge, but you can call me KG. I will be covering session 6 of this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be covering jQuery effects. jQuery allows us to add effects on a web page. It provides us many methods for effects on the web page. jQuery effects can be categorized into fading, sliding, hiding, or showing, and also the animation effects. In fact, we're going to see sliding effect into action right now in this session. We're also going to be covering the sliding effect with the login slider. We're going to see how we can implement the sliding effect for a login form. We'll also cover some animations using jQuery. More specifically, we'll be looking at the animate function. We'll see how to wait for an effect to be completed and then perform an action after using the callback function. All right, moving on. If you do not have fundamentals of JavaScript programming clear, then you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course as well as HTML to understand the document object model. All right, jQuery effects. So one of the best features of jQuery is its ability to add effects to our web page. Have you come across a website wherein there is a whole lot of interactivity and the web page objects are animated? Chances are they are built using jQuery. So let's look at a demo example of such effects real quick. So we'll look at an example for login slider. Okay, so let me go to the code. So in here I have 3 files. I have created the basic index.html. I have all my jQuery written in the JS file, and I have the styles for my login page in my styles.css. Okay, so what I have here is, if you look at the body element, let me make this a bit better. Okay, so if you can see here, I have a basic login form with input boxes for username and password. You want to make sure that this form is hidden by default and only visible when the user wants to log in. So if you look at the code where the login button is, oops, all right, here we go. All right, so if you look at the code where the login button is, we want the form to slide when the user clicks on the button. So jQuery provides us with a slide toggle method for the sliding effect. So on the button click event, we are going to use the slide panel div to slide down. So the slide panel div I have written right here. We want this to slide down when this button right here is clicked. Okay. So on the button click event, we will push the slide panel div to slide down. The value inside the slide toggle. So let me go inside the slide toggle and explain that function right here real quick. All right, so what will happen is, when I click on the button, I'm going to select the slide panel div and I'm going to attach a slide toggle function. The function usually takes in the speed, so this is denoting the speed right here. And if function where say this slide down is complete, you can ignore this for now, just for now. But the main thing that we want to put here is the speed. Okay. The value inside the slide toggle denotes the speed of the toggle. In this case, it is slow. So let us quickly save this and run this. Oops. Let me quickly run this and see how this looks. All right, so I have the login button right here. And if I click on it, it is going to slide down. It is going to give me options for the username and password and all of the other things that are required for a login form. So if you notice, the transition here is a bit slow, okay, because we have added the speed to slow. So let's say if we set it to fast and we save this, see it's loading fast. All right, great. Now let's move on to the next slide. Animations. So we can create custom animation effects using jQuery. The animate function allows us to do so. So let's look at a demo code real quick. Let me close this. All right, great. So in here we have basic boilerplate HTML, which contains a simple div. So we have a simple orange div. Let me toggle the word wrap. Right. I have a simple div with a background of orange, and I have certain properties for it, and the position is absolute. So what we want to do is, let me quickly run this. So what we want to do is, when we click on this, I want this to animate and move this div right in the center here and make it a bit bigger. Okay, I want it to transform. So if you go back here, what I'm doing is, when on the click event, okay, so when the div is clicked, I'm adding an animate function and providing it the properties. Okay, so once I provide the properties, I'm also giving it a speed of how fast the transition should be, or the transformation should be. And let's see, by clicking on it, how it looks. All right, perfect. You see the div size has increased and the location has shifted to right. Let's watch this again. All right, perfect. So you can do all kinds of custom animations using jQuery. I strongly encourage you to check the jQuery documentation to see all the possibilities that can be achieved using this. Since we won't have time to cover all of the possible combinations, so I strongly encourage you to check the documentation. Moving on to the next slide. So performing an action after the effect is complete. This is particularly important if you want to execute some action right after the effect has been completed. So for example, if you want to raise a pop-up window after animation is completed or activated, or show page elements after an effect is complete. So the way we solve this is, we have to use something called a callback function, which will be executed right after the effect is completed. So let's see this in action by editing our login panel code. So if you remember, I commented out this section right here. So what this is a callback function. Okay, and right after the speed here, let me make it slow again. All right, and we have a log inside. We have a console.log inside the callback function. So let me quickly run this. I have to select this HTML. Open up the apply server. All right, let me open up the inspect. I select the log. Select the console, and now if I click on this, and once the animation is completed, it logged it out. Let's look at this again. It logged it out again, right? So this is particularly important once this is logged out. But let's say the best example of in this case scenario is that, let's say if you want to black out the login button, okay, unless and until this form is shown, we have to hide this button. Right? So we can make that button active when the slide effect animation is completed. Right? Perfect. Moving on. Right. Recap. We learned about how to add effects to our HTML page and use jQuery to make the web page interactive and thus aesthetically pleasing and increasing the user experience. So that's it for today. I'll see you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but can call me KG. I will be covering session 7 of this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline.
If you have enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
In this session, we'll be covering swapping images, cross-fading images, time-based animations. Some of these will be covered in upcoming projects, so we'll keep this session short. If you do not have fundamentals of JavaScript programming clear, then you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course as well as HTML to understand the document object model. So swapping images using jQuery. We're actually going to cover this in one of our projects, so I won't go in much detail over here. We want to make sure we swap two images based on the button click event. We will have only single image tag with a generic image. Let's look at the code real quick. So I have a single image tag and a single button right here. What we want to do is we want to load a new image in this element, in this specific element, on the click of this button right here. Okay, so let's look at the jQuery for this. So right now I have declared two variables with image source URLs, and based on which image is being loaded right now, the images are being swapped. Okay, so let me quickly run this. Right, so the active image right now is of a desktop. So we have an active image of computer, and the other image is of phone. Okay, so if the current active image is of computer, then we are changing it to phone. If it is a phone, we're changing it back to the computer. All right, so let me quickly, let me move this here. Let's click on this and see if this is running correctly. All right, so it looks like it is running correctly. Excellent. So this is how you swap images. Moving on. So cross-fading images. We will actually use the fade out function that JavaScript provides us to have the fading effect on the image change. Let's look at some code real quick. All right, so let me actually run this and show you how this actually looks. All right, so if you notice, the images are being changed, and you can see the fading effect, the slowly transitioning from one image to another. So the way we do this is what I have done here is I have two methods for loading the images. All right, and then we have called in the fade in function. So for every 500 milliseconds, we're loading a new HTML with a image and a source. Okay, and then we're putting it a delay of 2000 milliseconds, and then we're fading out. And once we're faded out, we're calling in the second image function. So the second image function loads the second image. Okay, excellent. Moving on. Alright, so the timer-based animations. In here we'll be using the fading effects with the timer-based function, like set interval. Let's look at the code here real quick. Alright, so what I have done is right here is I simply have a div, okay, and I've created an arrow. So the arrow itself is being created using CSS. I will provide all the code on my GitHub page, so you can always go there and see how it's working. But to quickly show you what is happening right here, let me actually run this. Alright, so I have a button and I have this arrow. So when I click on this button, or when I move my cursor over on this button, the animation effect is taking place. So what is happening here? So if you go back, what is happening is when the document is ready, we're actually setting an interval and calling the move arrow function. So we're calling the move arrow function every 2000 milliseconds. Okay, so this is a timer-based function, the set interval. And in the move arrow function, we're calling the animate method that jQuery provides us, and we are moving it 500 pixels to the right. Okay, so we're putting in a padding of left of 500 pixels, and then fading it out, and we're pushing it again, we're starting it at 10 pixels. Okay, so this is what's happening. Perfect. So again, I will provide all the code for all of these 3 demos that I've showed you, and we will actually cover this in more detail in one of our projects, the image swapping. All right, so let's move ahead. So in this session, we covered image swapping, learned about adding fading effects using jQuery, and also having timer-based animations. In the next session, we'll cover links and navigation. Until then, goodbye, take care. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Garge, but you can call me KG. I will be covering session 8 of this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we will be covering some link basics. It's a quick refresher of understanding what hyperlinks are. We will also cover the opening of external links in new windows. We will understand about creating new windows, and we will see how we can use window properties to create basic and animated navigation bar. If you do not have fundamentals of JavaScript programming clear, then you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course as well as HTML to understand the document object model. All right, let's do some quick refresher on links. So all HTML links are hyperlinks, which means when you click on them, it is going to take you to a very specified address that is provided by the href attribute. So with the href attribute, you have to provide the link to the anchor tag or to even a button, and it will take you to that very specific destination. Okay. Now, depending on how the web page is coded, it will either open up the link in the same window, or it might open up in a new window. Okay. Moving on. So opening external links in a new window. So you can do this directly with HTML. However, let's say we want to add attributes to the newly created anchor elements. So let's say we created some anchor elements on the fly, like dynamically, and we want to add attributes to the newly created anchor elements, and we want all of their links to be open in a new tab. So how will we do this? Let's look at a demo code here real quick. So this is just a basic boilerplate HTML. I have added the head section right here, which has jQuery. Within the body section, I only have an anchor tag, and I have the script tag with the jQuery code. Okay. Now in here, if you can see this, if you can understand this, we're looking at all anchor tags that have href beginning with HTTP. Okay. Do you remember this caret symbol that we learned in the previous sessions? I'll give you a hint. It was the session with the wildcards. Yeah, this will allow us to select all the anchor tags with href attribute and which begin with HTTP. For these, we add more attributes such as target and blank, which will allow us to open all of the links in a new tab. So let's quickly see this. So if I click on this link right here, it is going to take me to a new tab. Perfect. Perfect. Moving on. All right, creating new windows. So we always have window.open methods to specify the browser which window to be open. So within the window.open, we can pass in the information that we want the browser to open up the link in a new window. So this is not very different from what we learned in JavaScript, but it's one of the ways we can use jQuery to open up new windows. All right, moving on. All right, so now let's look at how we can turn basic navigation into an animated one. Okay, so the main purpose of this small demo, is to understand how we can calculate the window properties, and based on it, how we can perform certain tasks. Okay, so we start off by creating a navigation bar using HTML and CSS. So let me go back, show you the code real quick. So here I have boilerplate code. Okay, so I have styles, I have the title, and I have the script tag added right in the head section. And within this, I have created a navigation bar with home, blog, company, and contact information. And I have the script tag where I have written my jQuery. Okay. Now what we want to do is when the user opens our web page on a tablet or smartphone, we want the navigation bar to adjust to the given screen size. We've added the necessary CSS for both of the screen sizes. So if we open up this head section and open up the styles, I have written code for both of the styles, so for mobile size as well as the desktop size. So we are not going to be covering CSS in this, but if you want, you can definitely take a look at the code at the end of the session. Okay, so with jQuery, what we'll do is based on the window size or based on the window resize event, we will apply or remove certain classes, certain styles. Okay, so in this case, let me go back. So just focus on this method right here. Okay, so in this case, when the window size is greater than 768 pixels, we are removing the default styles which would be suitable for a mobile view. Okay, so the way we have calculated the window width is by using the jQuery and the window object and calculating the width, and we've assigned it to a variable. Now, if the window width is greater than 768 pixels, then we are removing the stars. So let's quickly run this and see how this looks. So this is our basic, let me open this up in a new window here. All right, great. So this is our basic navigation bar, and let's say if you wanted to make it responsive, you see right here, it actually consolidated all of the options, all of the navigation options within a single item here, a single hamburger menu, which is when active, we'll have to now show the options in a slide toggle animation. So we have already covered slide toggle animation in the previous session. So let us quickly go back to the code. So now, once we have the menu options, when we click on it, we have to use the slide toggle method. Okay, so all of the CSS is already written for this. You can again go back and see how this works. But if I click on this, it should show me all of the options. Okay, so calculating the window size, the element size, allows us to change the look and feel of our page, allowing it to be more user-friendly. So you'll get access to this code in the resources slide so you can review it in detail. All right, perfect. Moving on. Oops. All right, so to quickly recap, in this session we covered some link basics as well as opening them in new window or tab. We also saw on how we can use the window properties such as height, width, etc. in our advantage. In the next session, we are going to go in detail over size and position of specific elements on the page. Till then, take care. Bye-bye. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. I will be covering session 9 of this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be working on the jQuery extension library, used specifically for building user interfaces. There will come some time in your developer journey where you will have to focus more on the user experience and think what's best for the user, for which you'll have to think about building user interfaces which are intuitive. This is where jQuery UI library comes in handy. You can find the library at jQueryui.com. By using this library, you'll be covering organizing information in tab panels, adding the content slider to your site, determining the size and position of page elements, and adding new tooltips. If you do not have fundamentals of JavaScript programming clear, you must take
Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.
the Introduction to JavaScript course, as well as HTML to understand document object model. Organizing information in tab panels. So in this section, we're going to be seeing how easy it is to organize content in tabs. Let's directly go to the code. We can come back to the slides later. So in here we have a master div with an ID of tabs, which comprises of three divs, which will have content for 3 tabs. And we also have an unordered list, which will include the headers for the tabs. With jQuery UI, we get tabs method for the tabs widget, which will be called on the main div with an ID of tabs here, right here. Let's run the code and see how this looks. Alright, so I have 3 tabs here, right here. And if I go back to the code, I have the content and I have an ID of tabs 1 and tabs 2. And I also have an unordered list with the headers which are referenced to one of these divs. And in the jQuery, all I'm doing is I'm calling in the tabs div and I'm calling in the tabs method. Okay. You can find more information about the events and styling methods, which you can use for the tab panels on jQuery UI documentation website. Moving on. Adding a content slider to your site. Consider a use case where you want to build a new e-commerce site. You want the user to be able to filter through the list of products based on the price. The prices can range from $10 to $500. Now the question is, how will the user filter the products easily? This is where the slider functionality comes in handy. Let's look at some code real quick. Alright. Here, I have a paragraph tag with an input tag for showing the selected amount and div. And a div where we'll show the slider for the selected price. Let's quickly run this and see how this looks. Alright, so I have a label here and I have this input element here which shows the current value. If I move the slider, the value changes. Alright, let's look at the jQuery code to understand the slider. Here I've attached slider simply to the div with an ID of slider and added the configuration options such as value, which will show the default value when the slider loads for the first time. So in this case it is 100. So when the web page loads, the default value will be 100. And we also have minimum and maximum values for the slider. So minimum is 0 and maximum is 500. And step, which will indicate the incremental or decremental steps we need to take when slider is moved. Here it is 50, which means if you move the slider to the right, the price will increase by $50. Now with the slide event, we are capturing here, we're setting the value for the amount of input box in the ID amount. Okay, so whenever we slide, we're changing the amount value. And that's what you're seeing right here. Okay, you can further check the documentation on jQueryui.com to see what are the customizations and variations you can build using the slider function. Again, I will provide all the code that I'm showing here today on my GitHub page. You can always go there and see and play around with it. And I strongly encourage you to build your own customizations based off the code I'm providing you. Moving on. Determining the size and position of page elements. This is relatively simple and you do not require to use the jQuery UI library. all you have to do is call upon the width and height methods of a particular element to get its size. And you can also call upon the position method to get the element's position. Let's look at the code real quick. So let me run this and show you how this looks first. It's just a single div with a color. Oops, I think I ran the wrong. Hold on. Alright, it's just a single div with a red color filled in. This has properties. This has properties of height of 700 and width of 500 pixels. Okay, and I'm going to be logging them out using the height and the width method on this particular element. So the element is the random, right? The ID of random, and the element is div. So if I go back here and if I open up my console, you can ignore these two errors. So the first log you see is that of height. So I'm calling it using height. And the second log is that of width. So that's 500. So you can see that's correct because I set the height to be 700 and the width to be 500. So let's say if I change this to, let's say 700, and if I save this, it will show 700. All right, perfect. And the last one is I'm calling the position method to get the position of the element. So the padding from top is about 8 pixels and from the left is about 8 pixels. So that's the position of the element. The size and position information of page elements is particularly important if you want the design to be responsive, if you want to build a responsive design, and if you want to rearrange some elements on the web page after an event like getting data from backend server. Moving on. Adding tooltips. Tooltips are short descriptions of elements which a user sees to get more information. Tooltips can be attached to any element. When you hover over the element with your mouse cursor, you can see the description. Tooltips are also useful for form elements, which we'll see in a moment, to show how additional information in the context of each field. Let's look at the code real quick. Let me show you the form. So I have a simple form inside a div with first name, last name, and the address. And let me quickly run this code to show you the tooltip. So I have a form here, and if I move my cursor over to any of the input elements, I will see a tooltip. It says, please provide your first name. Over here it says, please provide your last name. And it says, please provide your home or work address. So this is a tooltip that we are showing the user when the user moves their cursor over the input element to give them more information about what the expected input is. Let's move back to the code. So in the jQuery here, what I've done is I'm actually collecting all of the elements which have title attribute. So if I scroll down here, I have title attribute for all of the input elements with some value. Okay, so and I'm attaching a tooltip method to it with the position configuration. So position is like how we want to show the description of that particular tooltip. Okay, so I'm positioning it to the right, and I'm positioning it so that there's no collision if the two tooltips collide. Okay, you can find more information on the jQuery UI documentation, and you can use it to customize according to your use case. Moving back. So in this session, we learned about an extension library called jQuery UI to build better user interfaces. Some of the elements we covered were organizing the content in tabs, using sliders, and tooltips. That's it for today. I will see you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Garge, but you can call me KG. I'll be covering session 10 of this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be covering calling JSON APIs. We'll understand what JSON is and what JSON APIs are. We'll understand how to get the data from calling these JSON APIs and building DOM from it. And we'll also learn on adding interactivity to dynamically created assets. Alright, so if you have not taken the Fundamentals of JavaScript course, you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course or HTML to understand the document object model. Before we understand what JSON APIs are, let's quickly review what a JSON is. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is a lightweight data interchange format that is easy to understand, read and write for us humans, and it is also easy for machines to parse and generate. In simplest terms, it is a common language with which the backend and the front-end systems talk to each other. It is universal too, which means that virtually all modern programming languages support it in one form or the other. It is a collection of value object pair. So let's look at an example real quick. So let me open this up. So now let's say you wanted to get all the users available in your system from the server. You would ask the server to send the list of these users. Let me actually make this a little bit bigger. Let's see if I can do that. All right, there you go. So the users, the system will send these users in this following format, as you can see. Now you can see all of the users on the JSON format. So this is an example of a JSON format. So we have defined each and every user has an object with the ID, the name, the username, email. The address itself is a different object, which includes geolocation as well. And they have phone, website, and company. Again, it's a different object. Right? So this is an array of objects. So we get this when we call the JSON APIs. Now moving on to understand what APIs are. API, or Application Programming Interface, is a computing interface which defines interaction between multiple software systems. It defines the kinds of calls or requests that can be made and how to make them, the data format that should be used, the conventions to follow, and etc. So in this example, when we make a call to our backend server, we're following a strict framework for this interaction. The front end and the backend systems are both in consensus on how to communicate and what language to use. And for this particular example, the language is JSON. So JSON API is a specification of how a client should request that resources be fetched or modified, and how a server should respond to those requests. Okay, moving on. So now that we understand what JSON is and what APIs are, let's understand how we can use them using jQuery. So let's consider, for example, we want to get user information from the server in our HTML and the jQuery application. How will we do it? So we want to get this information right here, right? And we want to add this to our application. How will we do that? So to get this information from the server, we have to understand the concept of Ajax and its methods that are available for jQuery. Ajax is the art of exchanging data with a server and update the parts of web page without reloading the whole page. And the method we are particularly interested in this case is the jQuery.ajax method. So let's look at an example to see this in action. So let me open up a demo example. And here we have a basic boilerplate HTML code with jQuery added to it. Now let's look at the script tag right here real quick. All right, so now in here, once the document is ready, what we are doing, all right, great. So now in here, we're capturing the click event. Okay, so there is a button that we have created to display, to load the users and then display it in this div. So once we click on this button, and we're going to be adding that to the event handler, right? So once the button is clicked, we run the event handler, and in which we are using a jQuery Ajax function to retrieve the information from this particular URL. This function right here requires us to pass the URL and any configuration specific to receiving this data. We'll actually cover
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
this in detail when we work in the project, but let's look at this data by first logging in and out. So let me quickly comment this out, and let me log this data out real quick. Save this, open up with live server. All right, so I'm gonna open up the inspect element here, go to console, you can ignore this, and I'm going to click load users, so you can see it logged the data out here. All right, so we got 10 users with their information. Right now, the thing that we want to do is you want to load these, you want to process this data first and then show the username in our DOM. So how would we do that? So first we have to look at the name here. So for each of these users, we'll have to, first of all, this is an array, right? So we'll have to parse this array, get each and every individual user, and then get its name and display it. Okay, so let's go back. So what I've done here is I have created a variable and assigned the result to it. Okay, and for each and every user, we are going to find, let me quickly uncomment this. So for each and every user, we're going to be appending this to a list. So what I've done is I've created a list first. I've added a list tag of unordered list to the display, right? So display is this div right here. So what I've done is I've created a unordered list, and for each and every user that we get, we are going to append this user, the user's name, to the specific unordered list, right? So let's quickly save this and see how this looks. All right, there you go. We have loaded all of the users and the names in here. So you can ignore this cross button for right now. We'll cover this shortly. But this is how you can load this JSON API data into the HTML DOM. All right, moving on. So in the above example, we created some elements dynamically, right? The list of users were created when we got the data from the Ajax call. Now, what if we want to remove certain users from the list? We need to have an option to delete these individual users, right? So now, if we go back, I have added a remove button right here. This is a cross, okay? That's the multiplication symbol right there. And I've added a class of remove, okay? Now, you may say that we can add the delete button and this click event handler for each user record at a time, but that's not a good way of solving this problem. What if the list of users run into hundreds or thousands? So for this, we'll have to use the on method that we learned in session 5. So let's see how this works. So let me uncomment this. So with this on method right here, we are listening to the click event on multiple elements. So I have multiple elements here. So no matter how many users are created, we'll always have an anchor tag that will have a class of remove, right? And we will find all of these anchor tags that have the class of remove and write in this bit of code here. So it says that this is the actual object, the parent, and remove. So we're removing the entire parent, right? So if we save this and run this, I'm just going to close this. All right. So if I remove one of these, so what is happening right now is I'm removing these users from the DOM tree, right? So what we have done in here is we have added the interactivity to dynamically created assets. So these are dynamically created assets, right? These are dynamically created assets. So we have added the interactivity for these assets, and it's much more easier for us to use the class attribute than to assign ID for each and every dynamically created uh, asset, right? All right, moving on. So a quick recap. In this session, we learned what a JSON API is. We also saw an example of how JSON looks. We also saw how we can use jQuery to get information from server using the Ajax method. We learned how we can interact with data that we have received and how we can show it on the DOM. We also learned how we can interact with dynamically added DOM elements, for which we will use the on method. This is the end of our theoretical sessions. From the next session onwards, we'll be working on some projects to sharpen our jQuery programming skills. So we'll definitely be using this JSON API and work on a similar project that you just saw right now. So I'll see you in the next session. Take care. Have a good day.
Hi, welcome to Coding Bootcamp's YouTube channel. Subscribe now and join our live stream session later. See you.
Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON on Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. I will be working on our first project for this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be first covering the recap of the previous sessions and what we have done thus far. Afterwards, we will work on our first project, for which we will be setting up an image gallery using HTML and learning the various events which we can capture using jQuery to make changes to our image gallery. If you do not have fundamentals of JavaScript programming clear, you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course as well as HTML to understand the document object model. So thus far we have covered fundamentals of jQuery programming. We learned how we can add jQuery to our projects and how we can use the same functionalities that JavaScript provides us, but with a clean and easy code to follow. Plus, jQuery allows us to add animations and other effects to our web page, adding a bit of interactivity to the web page, thus enhancing the user experience. In this project, we're going to create a simple image gallery using HTML5, which changes the active picture in the gallery when the user moves their mouse cursor on the button. You must have seen this especially for tourism-related websites, more specifically for hotels, where they want you to showcase the details of the package and what the tourists can expect when they stay at the hotel. So that's one of the use cases. One of the other use cases you can do is you can just create a picture gallery for yourself, for your own personal pictures. All right, so moving on. Again, as a reminder, if you have not installed Visual Studio Code or any other code editor plus a web browser, you must do it. I'm currently using Google Chrome as my web browser and Visual Studio Code as my code editor. You can find the project files on my GitHub. The links we'll be using for this project are directly added through the hyperlinks. If you want, you can have a directory and store all your images instead of using links, and provide the relative path to the source attribute of the image tag. Alright, so let's move over to Visual Studio Code Editor and begin coding directly. We'll get back to the slides once we're done. Alright, so I have some pre-written HTML code in order to save some time. We simply have a main div right here with a class of container, and which has a subdiv holding all the buttons, and we have an image tag. Okay, notice here we have only a single image tag which will load all of our images. I've added the 5 buttons here. These can be divs, paragraphs, tags, or any element which supports the mouse over event. The idea is when the user hovers over the load image button. So when the user hovers over the load image button, the relevant image will be loaded. Okay, so let's write some jQuery for here real quick. Let me add a script tag. All right, so what we need to do, we need to first get access to this particular image element here. So we have an ID. So what we want to do is first we want to make sure that the HTML has been loaded. So do you remember what function we use to make sure all of the HTML elements have been loaded? So it's the document.ready. Okay, so we have jQuery, pass in the document, it checks if the document is ready, and within it we pass in a function. All right, so I'm just gonna check for all of the images. So we have 4 images right now with specific classes. So I'm going to select these classes. So do you remember what is how you can select classes? Right. So in the basic JavaScript we had get element by class name. In jQuery we just have to add in a period and the class name. So the first class is image1, right? And we're going to use the on method, in which we'll be listening for mouse over. Okay, so once we listen to the mouse over, we're going to run a function, and in which what we are going to do is we're going to change the attribute for this image tag. So the attribute source, we're going to change this. Okay, so right now we have a basic image that I've loaded here. So let's first quickly see what this image looks like. Let me open this up with the live server. Right, so this is the basic image that we have loaded. Right now we don't have any jQuery, so we are not loading any other images. So let's quickly go back and change the attribute on the mouse over event. Okay, so I have to select the change image, right? So the way we do it is we use jQuery and the pound symbol and change image. That's the ID. And I'm going to access the attribute for this by using attribute, and in which here the attribute function takes in 2 parameters. One is the actual attribute and one is the value. So you can either get or set. In this case we are setting it up, so we're setting the source attribute, and in here I am just going to add a URL real quick. So let me find some URL. So I usually use unsplash.com's images. They're free, and also they're free to use, as in the license is free. So I just use these images. I like these images. So what I will say is let's say trees, and let me open this up in a new tab and just copy over this link right here. Right, so just paste it. Now the image size is too big, so I'm just going to change it to the width to 900 pixels. Save it, and let's see if this works first. And go back, reload the page, and if I hover over the load image 2, it loads. Load 3 and load 4 won't work because we haven't written code for it. Okay, so let's quickly add for the rest of the images, so the rest of the buttons. So let's do that real quick. So I'm just going to copy paste over this code 4 times and just change the URL. So in here, I'm going to do image 2, image 3, and image 4, and I'm just going to add in some new URLs. Okay, so I've added the trees already. Let me close this. Let me find a new image real quick. Let me add flowers. All right. So I'm just going to get this image right here, go back, and add a new URL. And change the width to 900 because it's too big for my screen size. Alright, close this. Close this as well. Let's add moss. Alright. Go back. Change one for the image 3. Save it. Change this to 900 again. I have image 1, I have image 2, I have image 3, image 4. This is extra. Okay, I'm just going to remove this. Make some space here. I need to add one more image for image 4. Let's say fruits on trees. Alright. Let me quickly change this. So what you can do is you can use your own private gallery as well. If you have images, you can use those as well instead of adding the links. Save this. Right, so I've covered for image 4, image 3, and image 2. Let me save this and go back and see how this looks. Let me reload this. So I have image 1, image 2, image 3, and image 4. Perfect. So if you notice, whenever I hover over, the images change. Perfect. That's what we wanted. Let's go back to the slides. Alright, so we covered one of the approaches to build a image swap feature for the image gallery. Now this is not the only way we can build an image gallery. You can further add your own enhancements to this, and I encourage you to build them over this application. The purpose of this project was to get you started. Now you can build your own enhancements on top of it. An example would be instead of hovering over the 4 buttons, so we have used the mouse over, you can use the dot hover function as well. Instead of hovering over the 4 buttons, just have one button and make sure you can activate image changes on each mouse over event. Okay. The trick is to have image links in an array. So what we have in here, if you go back to the code, so we are adding the images one at a time. So instead of doing that, what you can do is you can have all the image links in an array and loop over the array one image at a time on the mouse over event. In the next level of enhancement, you can use mouse over event on the image itself. So when the user hovers over the cursor over the active image, so instead of having mouse over on the button, all you can do is you can just have a mouse over on the image itself and it will load the next image in the array. Or you can have a timer function. You learned in JavaScript course timer functions such as set interval to change the active image one at a time. So you can have yourself a screensaver. You can also use some jQuery plugins for which I have added links in the resources section for the slides. So you can use jQuery plugins, and you can also use jQuery UI to build a more advanced image gallery. All right, so that's it with the project 1. I will see you in the next session for project 2. Take care. Bye. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. We will be working on our second project for this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we will first review our previous project, then start working on a new project where we will build a login form. We will learn how to get the user inputted data and use Ajax to send this data to an API service and authenticate the user. Moving on. Again, as a reminder, if you have not taken Fundamentals to JavaScript Programming before, then you must take the Introduction to JavaScript course, as well as HTML to understand the document object model. So in the previous project, we actually worked on manipulating the
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
DOM. We built a simple image swap gallery where we used the jQuery functions to figure out the mouse events and change the active image within the gallery. Okay, so we worked on manipulating the DOM, but in this project we'll be working on something a bit advanced. We'll be working on Ajax calls. So in this project we'll be covering the most common functionality on the web today, that is the user authentication. You've seen this functionality for various sites and applications that you use. There are various ways in which a user can be authenticated. However, we're going to cover the most traditional way of using an email and a password. But however, I strongly encourage you, after you're done with this and you're confident enough that you can handle the user authentication using email and password, you should look into the two-factor authentication when you can use some third-party authentication libraries. But moving on, again, as a reminder, make sure you have the Google Chrome browser and code editor like Visual Studio Code installed on your computer. The project source code files are available on my GitHub page. You can download them and review the code if you get stuck at any point during the session. So now we have everything in order. Let's begin. So let's begin by creating a simple form with 2 input boxes and a button. I'm going to be using Bootstrap to make them look better. So I have the basic boilerplate code ready so that we can quickly jump into the jQuery side and figure out how we can provide the user authentication data to the backend server. All right, so what I have now with me here is a basic boilerplate code. I have included jQuery as well as Bootstrap, and I've also included my main.js file in which we'll be writing most of our code. Okay, so let's quickly review this HTML body. So I have a simple form element in which we have email address and password, and a button to submit the email and the password to the backend. And I also have a div where I will show the message for the user if the login information is correct or incorrect. So let's quickly run this and see how this looks. So this is how the form actually looks. And if I go to the inspect element, I don't think I have any JavaScript written right now, so let's avoid that for now. But I just have a simple form with 2 fields and a button. Let's go back and write some jQuery. Alright, so now first thing is obviously we have to make sure that the document is ready. So I'll say document.ready and pass in a function. Alright, so now the first thing is we have to listen to the onSubmit event for the form. So if you go back to the index.html, we already have a form, and first thing we have to do is listen to the submit event. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an ID of the form. So it's login form. Oops. All right, and I'm going to listen for the submit event, and I'm going to get the information from the form. Okay, so if I save this and if I go back, I need the information from the input email. Let me close this email as well as the password. So I'll be using the ID to get the data from them. All right, so, and I'll store them in a variable. So let me create a variable first. I'll say username, and I will use the jQuery user email dot value, and I'm going to use the trim function. So the trim function actually removes any white space before or after the characters. Okay, I'll create the same one for the password, and I'm just going to reuse this and change this to password. All right, perfect. Now we're going to use the Ajax function, but before we do that, we have to make sure that we have the server running. So in this case, for this particular project, I have quickly built a server right here that is available on my GitHub page. So let me quickly open this up, and in here I'm going to just running this particular command. It says npm run, not npm run or npm start, and it's going to start my server. That's all you have to do. If you want, you can take a look at the code. It's simple Node.js server that's running, and we're only looking to see if the email is of test at testdata.com, as well as its password is password. Okay, so make sure you have the server running. Going back to the jQuery, now in here, the first thing we are going to check if the user email and password are not blank, right? So I'm going to use an if statement, and I'm going to say if the username not equal to blank and password not equal to blank. All right, so if this is true, then I'm going to run the Ajax. Let me quickly close this. I'm going to write the Ajax code. So we'll say jQuery.ajax, and we'll pass in the parameters. Okay, so the URL that we're going to log in is the local host. Okay, so I'm going to say URL. I'm just going to copy the server URL that I have. Oops. Okay, and I'm going to be listening to the login, so I'm just going to say login. Okay, now the type for this Ajax request is, can you guess it? It is post, because we're sending in the data, right? So we are not getting anything. It won't be get, it will be post. It can be get too. You can even send data using the get, but it's best if you send using the post. Okay, so the content type is the form data. So I'm going to say application form URL encoded. So this is the data format that the server requires, so I have provided to it. And in here I'm going to just send the data. So I'm going to say email, and I'm going to use the username. Quickly shorten this. Username and password is password. All right, perfect. Now we're going to see, we're going to have to make sure we add events, we add we handle the success as well as the failure events. So I'll say success, and I'll call it a function. In here I'll get the response. Right. Now let's actually print this response out on the HTML, because since if you look at the HTML code, I have created a special div to show the response from the server. So I'm just going to call this and attach response to this. Okay. So let me quickly go back here and create a blank variable and assign this the response. Okay, and in here I'm going to get the message div and attach it as an HTML. So I'll say HTML message. Oops. All right, and for the error, we'll use the same way. Instead of catching a response, we'll catch an error, and I will just reuse this, and instead of response I'll say error dot response text. All right, perfect. And I have to make sure that the form doesn't jump because of the traditional event property. So I'll just say event dot prevent default. All right, perfect. Let me save this, make sure everything is in order. So we have two variables. I'm getting the data from the user, and I'm just passing that data inside the Ajax function in the data object, and depending on the success or error of the response from the server, I'm going to display it to the user. So let's quickly run this. Say open with live server, and the way the server is configured is it is only going to take test at test.com and password as password. So I'm going to see if these two fields work. All right, so it says user with test at test.com logged in successfully. So we have entered the correct details. So what if we enter the password incorrectly? So let me enter something else. Let me enter 1 2 3 4 5 and submit it. It says wrong password. Okay, so the message is being sent to us by the server, and all of the verification is done by the server and not on the front end. Okay, so that's good. So I'll say password, submit. It says correctly. What happens if we enter the email address wrong? So let's say I entered test2 at test.com. What happens then? It says the user account for test2 at test.com does not exist. So again, the configuration is set in the server. For the purpose of this project, we're only concerned with the Ajax, right? So that's why you can use this server, or you can, if you have an access to a different authentication server, you can use it there. All you have to do is make sure you follow the server's data format. So this is data format that we have for our existing server. It requires the object with the values for email and password, as well as the content type. So make sure you have both of those. Okay, so perfect. So perfect. Now that we are done with the login form, we are done with the project too. So we actually created an HTML form by using simple form element and using a bit of Bootstrap. We used the Ajax call to log into the server. We made sure that we used document.getReady to see if to make sure that the jQuery is actually seeing if the HTML has actually been loaded, and we use the Ajax function and use the request type of post, and we handle the response. So that is it. That's the end of project 2. I will see you in the next project. Thank you. Hey, welcome back guys to Intermediate JavaScript and jQuery programming with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but can call me KG. We will be working on the final project for this Intermediate JavaScript course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we'll be quickly doing a recap of the previous project. We'll be working on the Ajax call again in this project, but we're also going to learn how to process the data that we receive from the API server and display it on our web page. For this project, we'll be building a dashboard that shows all the active cases for the COVID-19. Again, as a reminder, if you do not have taken Fundamentals of JavaScript Programming course before, then you have to take the Introduction to JavaScript as well as Introduction to HTML to understand the document object model before taking this course.
If you have enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
So in the previous project, we covered two things. We covered how to manipulate the DOM using jQuery and how to use Ajax to make calls to the API server. In this project, we'll work on getting the data from the API server using Ajax call, and then we'll work on this data to make it presentable and displayed in our web page by manipulating the document object model. So we'll be building a COVID tracker using the COVID-19 API.com. The year 2020 will go down in the history books for this global pandemic and the importance of digital infrastructure in this global shutdown. We will be learning how we can build better applications and systems to help other people. The API is built from data made available to us by Johns Hopkins University. The data is vast. However, for the purpose of this project, we're going to be focusing only on the number of cases per country. However, I strongly encourage you to explore the data and build on top of the application to learn more and sharpen your jQuery skills. Like always, make sure you have Google Chrome browser and code editor like Visual Studio Code installed on your computer. The project source code files are provided on my GitHub page. You can download them and review the code if you get stuck at any point during this session. So now we have everything in order. Let's begin. So the first thing we need is the data from the API server. We will call the API resource URI at covid19api.com. So let's quickly jump into that. So this is the resource URL that you have to go to, covid19api.com. And the data that is being provided to us is from Johns Hopkins University. And all you have to do is use this URL to get the data. Okay, so let's quickly jump into the code. So I have a basic template of HTML right here. I've included jQuery and Bootstrap. And what I want to do here is I want to show the cases, the COVID-19 cases on a per country basis. So what I have here is I have a header with the name COVID-19 tracker. I have created a paragraph that says the current active COVID-19 cases by countries, and there's a load button by which we will actually, when you click on the button, we'll actually call the API server and get the data and load it onto the web page. Okay. We also have a table with one column for country and one column for cases, and the table body is something we will manipulate and add the data to it. I've also included my main.js file right at the bottom. So let's quickly jump into the main.js where we'll actually start writing the code. All right, so the first thing is, like I said, we have a button. So we'll have to catch the button click event, right? So we have the button. So what we need to do is capture the event. First, we have to make sure the document has been loaded. So we'll say document dot ready, pass in a function in here. So when the document is ready, we're going to be listening for the button click. So I'll be using the button class that I already have. So for this particular thing, for this particular button, I have a class of btn that's directly from the Bootstrap library. So I'll be just calling that, and I will listen to the click event. So I'll say click, and inside we'll pass in a function. Right now we have to use the Ajax call here, Ajax method here. So can you figure out what kind of request this will be? Will it be a get or post or put or delete? I guess it right, it will be the get request. So we'll say Ajax, and in here we'll pass the parameters. So the type is of get. The content type we need is application JSON, so I'll say content type of application slash JSON, and the URL. So the URL is provided to you in the slides, the PowerPoint slides, but I'll just type it in here, api.covid19api.com, and I need all the records, so I'm going to just use summary. So all of the details are actually provided on their website. If you were to go to their website and read the documentation, so this is the documentation that you can explore. So we have all of the information within the summary. So we get a summary of new and total cases per country updated daily. This is the response that we get, right? So if I explore this, so this is one of the kind of response that we get from here. It's an example response, and they have different number of endpoints that you can use, and if you can see here, they have the request type as well. So we have to use the get request type for almost all of the endpoints right here. All right, moving back. Okay, what else do we need now? I think we're done. So we just have to listen for the success event now. So we'll say success. I'll pass in the function, get the data, and in here now what I have to do is I already have a table, right? So I already created a table. The first row is the table header where I have country and cases listed. All I have to do is make sure I add a new table row inside the table body. Okay, so let's compose a table row first. Actually, first log in the data. Let's see what kind of data are we dealing with. Okay, so let me save this and run this. So I'll say open with live server. Alright, so you have the header here, you have a paragraph, and you have the load list button here, and I'm using the table. So right now we are not manipulating the DOM, we are just looking at the console. So let me click load list, and I get the data right here. So let me see what kind of data are we dealing with. So we get an object that says it's global countries, and there's a date. So if we open up the countries, we have about 185 countries. Whoa, that's a lot. Okay, so you have the global statistics here as well. So newly confirmed cases, total number of cases, new deaths, total recovered. Yeah, so we're only concerned about the countries for now. So we have about we have more than 100 countries, 186 actually. So we have to display this. Okay, so let's go back to the code. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to save this in a an array, because if you looked at here, the countries that we are getting is an array of 186 records. So first of all, we have to save this in a local variable. So what I will do is, I will say, variable countries equals, I'll create a blank array first, and then I will countries equals data dot countries. Is it the capital C? Yeah, it is a capital C. Okay. All right, excellent. Let's save it. And now for each record, we have to pick the country name and pick the total confirmed cases. So, oops, let's actually keep the console log. We have to make sure we refer to it. So data dot countries. All right, let me load this. Now if I expand this, expand the first 100, I get the country name, I get the country code. There's a slug that's a uniquely identifiable property. So if I expand this, I get country, country code, date, newly confirmed, new date, new deaths, new recovered, total confirmed, and total deaths. So what we need right now is we just need the total confirmed number, right? And we need the country name. Okay, so for each and every one of the objects, we have to pull this information and display it on the web page. So let's go back. Oops. All right, so I'm going to comment this out to make some space here. Close this up. All right, great. So we're getting an array of objects, right? So what we can do is we can use the object.values. It's a traditional JavaScript function, right? So we can use object.values. I'm not using jQuery here. This is traditional JavaScript. Inside we'll pass in the countries, and for each country, I'm going to use the fat arrow function. Remember the fat arrow function. Keep the code simple. In this, let's quickly log out the country records. So I'm just gonna save this and go back and see if this works. I'm going to click the load list button, and I get each and every country, right? So this is a loop running. Okay, so that's great. Okay, so now we have to compose a table row. Okay, so I'm going to create a property here for table row. So, and this is going to be an HTML property. So I'll say variable table row. Oops. Yeah, let me quickly put this in line. All right. So the table row that we are going to be creating is HTML. I'll create a blank first and then append to this. So I'll quickly comment this out. And for table row HTML, I will append, right? So I will say table row, the table data, and I want to highlight it, so I'm going to use the strong tag right here. I'll say country dot country, because if we go back, if you go back and if you see, this is the country object, and you have country, and then we need country as well as we need the total confirmed, right? So I'll say country dot country, append, close the strong tag, and quickly wrap. Okay, all right, close the table data and open up a new table data for the total number of cases, right? So I will use a span and a bootstrap class. So I'll say class label success, and I will say country dot total confirmed. Say the T and C are capital. Yep. Okay, great. So the total confirmed, and I'm going to close the span and close the table data as well, and also the row. All right, great. So we have composed the table row. Great. Now we have to do is we have to append this to the table data, right? So if we select the index.html, we have to append this to the table body. I'm sorry, we have to append the table data to the table body. So the table body, we have given an ID of country list. So what we can do is, outside of this, we can say jQuery, call this by ID, it's country
Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.
list, and add the HTML. So the HTML will be this table row HTML. Perfect. Let's see how this looks. I'm going to close this. Perfect. Perfect. So we have all the countries on the left hand side and the number of cases on the right. So we have all of 186, I think. Yep, we have from A to Z. Perfect, perfect. Let's go back to the slides. So we got the data and we manipulated it. We used the Ajax get request to get the data, and we looped through the JavaScript objects to retrieve the data that we needed the most and displayed it on the web page. So that's perfect. So again, a quick recap of what we learned from this project. We learned how we can use Ajax call to get the information from the API server. We also learned how to get the information, process it, and present it on the web page. I'm going to recommend you to look at the other data that we're getting from the API and process it and show it to the user as well. It'll help you understand jQuery better and allow you to build a much more sophisticated dashboard. So this concludes our course for intermediate JavaScript, Ajax, and jQuery. Thank you very much. Hey guys, congratulations on taking the Coding Bootcamps course for intermediate JavaScript and jQuery training with JSON and Ajax. My name is Kostab Gharge, and I'm very excited that you have completed this course. Here is the quick overview of what we covered in this course. So we covered a quick JavaScript programming refresher, where we covered the fundamentals of JavaScript, including the lexical structure of the language, expressions, types, variables, functions, arrays, loops, and the functions as well, the methods. And after that, we covered the functions and arrays in a much more depth. We covered the functions, parameters, the return keyword, as well as functions with from events, calling the functions from events, as well as declaring and manipulating the different arrays. After that, we covered on obtaining and manipulating user information using the browser objects such as Navigator, window, and screen object. So based on the information we got, we customized the user experience of our web page to that particular window size, the window screen that the user was using. After which we also covered the advanced concepts of jQuery, where we understood how to install jQuery, how to get it to your web page, and how to modify the web pages using jQuery. But before that, we had to understand what the document object model is and how we can read the document object model using jQuery, and then make changes to those different elements on the HTML. Okay, we actually covered how to select different elements using tags, IDs, class attributes, and positions, and after which we also learned how to add events to those specific elements. So events were an important concept. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did, because events is something that will be common in different frameworks as well, because that is a fundamental concept in the front-end programming, where the user interacts with the different objects on your web page, and you get to decide what to do about it. Okay, so once you understand the events in jQuery, you are now pretty much confident enough to jump onto much more advanced frameworks that handle events like React as well as Angular. After this, we covered the animation and effects. So jQuery effects, we created some animation, we created an animated dashboard, and that was pretty interesting because basic JavaScript, it is quite hard to create these animations, but jQuery, we get everything pre-built. That was good. We also learned how to improve our navigation and also improve upon the images. We actually did a small project where we created a slideshow of images, and after that, with the basic improved navigation as well as the slider and the animation that we learned in the previous sessions, we use that same knowledge to build a login page, which is very common in web applications these days. So now you have good understanding of building a login page and how to allow user to log in as well as access the information that they want to access. And in the final project, which was the most interesting project, where we got the data in JSON format from a third-party API, that was COVID tracker, where we got all the COVID related information, where we actually parsed the data first of all to display the number of cases by the countries. And what you learn in this session is very important. You understood what JSON is, what Ajax calls are, and how to handle HTTP requests. Okay, so now actually you are very in a good position to understand how to make HTTP calls and get more data from the API, from the various APIs. So I strongly encourage you to check out any public APIs that are out there and implement your skills by utilizing those APIs. So congratulations on successfully finishing this class. I will see you in the next session, but before I do, here are a few follow-up classes that we have. I teach Node.js, and I think you should definitely take Node.js because it teaches you to implement JavaScript on the backend. So you remember those APIs that you consumed, the COVID Tracker API. We can build something like that using Node.js. Okay. You can also cover Angular and React.js courses, but please make sure to follow us on social media to check out my latest courses. Thank you and have a good day.